the biggest shouting I have ever gotten was from a client when I was still in customer service for wishing them to have a good afternoon.
Mm.
So no matter what you say, you can't predict how the other people is going to take it.
With feedback, like there's like this fine line, like to not just stay objective basically and not take anything personally. I think that's like a very hard.
Yet oftentimes what we are lacking is the capability to discuss like what went wrong, to give feedback.
Welcome to Taiste Talks here at Taiste office. Today we have a special guest here, and we are going to talk about communication with developers. And just to mention, this is our first talk in English, so that's exciting. So, should we start with introductions first?
My name is Vlad, and I work in Taiste as a software developer. I started a bit later than Tom started this year. And in total, I have like a couple of years of experience, and mostly I develop mobile applications. My background actually comes also to business management. That's what I studied, but I decided to switch to this profile, software developer, and I'm glad that I did that.
I'm Tom. I'm a software developer here at Taiste as well. I have experience for a bit over 6 years now as a software dev from a couple of different companies. I guess my background is a bit traditional, like I just studied IT and just went straight into the career. But well, at school I actually liked like game development. I was into that, and I do like games, but somehow I just didn't go into that route, and just kind of at the end of the school I kind of just learned web dev stuff and like started from there.
It's nice to see you, Tom and Vlad. And then I'm a complete different species as I am a developer of people. So my background is in humanities. My name is Elisa. I work as a developer of people, koodarikuiskaaja in Finnish. And it means that I teach soft skills to technical experts and sometimes non-technical experts as well, but mainly like in the realm of software industry. So I represent maybe the non-technical side of things today. Even though I have been working with the software industry for over 10 years now. So I think I have a good grasp and understanding of the day ins and out of your realm of expertise as well.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice to meet you.
Where should we start?
Communication.
But speaking about backgrounds, I think when we discuss about like the topic being developer communication with non-developers or technical with non-technical people.
Yes.
How was it in your studies? Did you have any topics about communication?
Yes, there were like project management, like studies, like classes, but they were very like, I would say I didn't really learn that much there. Naturally, you learn more once you actually have to do some work and get results. I wouldn't say that I didn't have really any studies about like how to communicate effectively or anything like that, really. And that is weird because communication really is the key.
Exactly. How about you?
I would say that in comparison to technical studies and business studies, we of course had this kind of like a subject which was called business communication. I'm glad that I had it, but I'm not glad that I don't remember anything from there. So if anyone is watching, any of my teachers are watching that, I'm very sorry about that, but I'm pretty sure that I used a lot from that during my like work life. What would you say? How do you feel like in your life? How was the communication? Regarding the studies. did you remember anything from studies as well?
Yeah, well, you would think that coming from the realm of humanities that we might have more, but we actually don't. So we had one course about public speaking, and I think that's even more than many technical studies have.
Yes.
And then we had one course about technical or academic writing, and that's it.
All right.
I think we could benefit from having some basic concepts about feedback giving or teamwork or just understanding how I function as a human being.
Well, yeah, that is true. Like the feedback thing, for example, very useful. I mean, in the studies, there are like these projects that I guess is supposed to like teach you teamwork and all that, but it's school. The stakes are not as high. You don't actually have to do anything really or get like any actual results, working results that people actually use. So I would say it's a bit different.
Yeah, and you don't have any investment in it. You don't necessarily have to meet the people ever again. So
yeah, exactly,
you can give the feedback however you wish, and you don't really have to care. Of course, we care because we're humans, but like you don't necessarily have to care whether the relationship will become stronger or better.
Yeah. You just do the project and that's it. So you don't have like this ongoing process of communicating for like a couple of years, for example.
Also touching feedback topic, like in school, they teach us, like, for example, during this business management studies, they teach us like how to motivate employees or like your co-workers or in general people. Yeah, it's giving feedback, and that's true. But unfortunately, during my work life, I didn't really experience getting much feedback, or if that feedback, if it even was, that was mostly negative, and we all know that the negative feedback is like the most common thing. But as for from my side, I always try to give as positive and as negative feedback to any of my coworkers, if like, I mean, there was something to tell.
Yeah, usually you hear feedback only when things go wrong.
Yeah,
basically, and you usually forget the positive feedback. So, how would you say, Elisa? Like, what is like effective feedback?
Wow, what a question!
Okay, that's a very vague question.
No, it's a good one. It's a good one. Let me ramble a little bit. I was just teaching feedback to this group of consultants, and one of them said that we do get feedback, like we do get and give feedback all the time because we have code reviews, and I think that is true that you do get a lot of feedback, and code reviews are one example, and then if you have retrospectives, that's another format where you do give and give feedback. The only problem with that is that it oftentimes focuses on the things that you should do better, especially code reviews.
Yes.
I've been told that it's mostly like, okay, fix this and fix that, instead of like, this was beautiful, thank you for doing this, or I really appreciated how you did that one.
Yeah.
I can say a bit opposite, at least what I experience currently. I always get like both feedbacks, like I mean both sides of feedback. Well, if I send the code for review, I normally get it's either like, okay, at least okay, this works, you can merge, or comments on what I should fix. I mean, there's nothing like just a tick mark, like a check mark, and that's it. There is at least some short thing, especially if it took like more time than expected.
I think you should then appreciate your colleagues for taking the time to also noticing the good things, because it's not.
That's not a given. Like
no.
Yeah.
Apparently not, at least.
All people do not give like feedback at all. Actually.
Yeah.
Do you think that you should always like figure like something out to give like positive feedback, even you don't really see anything positive?
No.
Should you force it?
No, because it sounds ingenuine.
Yeah.
Especially, I think especially developers are quite good at noticing when something is not genuine. I think that's your superpower somehow.
Yeah, that's true. I would say also that, like, for example, I'm the person who likes to talk, who is a bit more emotional.
First of all, I love the way we can dive into stereotypes here. Because but there is a root of truth in stereotypes, but it's really interesting because when I started as a developer of people, and even nowadays when I talk to other people what I do, like people from other domains than software development, that yes, I teach soft skills to technical experts, the first comment that I get is like, good, they need that. And it's like, wow, that's quite strong, harsh stereotype and expectation about people.
I have friends who are just sitting home and just do development, and they okay, I either don't care about the result or I don't care about when it's going to be done. I just care about that I get the salary and I can live, so I can survive.
Okay.
So that's not the case, like in this group at least, or at least in this company, I would say. That's also not the case.
Yeah, there's definitely, I guess, stereotyping, like just subconscious bias, like with everything basically. But I guess there's some truth to that. Like, what kind of people just go to like software development, for example? Like, not everyone can just sit in front of a computer and solve problems all day long.
Exactly.
They might get frustrated, but like with feedback, like how to avoid like. There's like this fine line, like to not just stay objective basically and not take anything personally. I think that's like a very hard also as a developer, because, and I guess in working life as well, like you shouldn't take the work personally, but also you should give feedback and stuff like that. And that's a fine line. So
I think that's another rabbit hole that I was getting into, is that I love that you say that your colleagues know what you want, how you want your feedback, what makes you tick. Because I think we have, like you said, there are differences. There are people who rather take it like very point blank, fix these, or this is not working, and that's the way they would want to have it. And there are people who actually do require to have a bit more explanations, or to add the positive as well, or just to consider feelings, for example. So I think that we should learn more about the people we work with before we give them feedback.
Right, yeah.
So that we know that what is your style of communication, how would you want it?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. All the approaches don't work. Like there's no generic approach that works for everyone.
Yeah.
Someone might not like point out flaws or something like that in the code, for example. Someone might really not like that, so you have to be more careful with that.
There are people who don't like the full stop, the point in the end of the messages when you just message hi dot.
All right, you need emojis.
So I would use emojis for that.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, but then again, you can use the wrong emoji. You would like the very basic, like 2 dots and a smiley face, and that's passive aggressive apparently nowadays. And I'm like, oh my god, I use that all the time.
I'm pretty sure that depends like on a generation. Like younger generation uses emojis differently.
Yeah, they do. And it's very funny. My spouse has two kids. They're 12 and 11, and they come to me and they're like, yeah, you can't use that anymore. I was like, oh, why? Well, because these are like, no, right, don't take that emoji away from me. Right.
I'm just wondering what kind of emoji is that?
Yeah, they tend to change all the time. Like once you get the hang of it, then they come back like 2 weeks later and like, yeah, no, that's no longer okay. It's like, that was okay 2 weeks ago.
But there we can go to like the text-based communication. It's very different like from this face-to-face communication, because like there's a lot more room for misunderstandings if it's just text.
Yes.
You really don't get the tone at all usually. And that's, I guess, what emojis are for. But I'm just thinking like how to avoid problems there.
It's just knowing person individually.
Well, yes, I guess that's one of the answers. Just like get to know the people you work with, and or just like, I don't know. I've trusted in my communication just the power of like a positive intention. Like I never mean any harm, So I'm like going through communications with just that.
And
but
then,
I have no idea if like some people have been offended or something like that. I've actually never gotten any feedback from that.
and you can't even control that, like
Well, that's
whether
true.
somebody gets offended. Like my favorite example is that the biggest shouting I have ever gotten was from a client when I was still in customer service for wishing them to have a good afternoon. So no matter what you say, you can't predict how the other people is going to take it. But I agree that knowing your coworkers is a very good thing. And then you have this attitude of good intention. And then I would recommend trying to build a culture, a company culture with the principle of charity. So the principle of charity is that you always suspect that the other person meant well, even if they don't sound like it. So might be that they wrote it in a hurry, might be that they didn't know that adding a dot at the end of the sentence is now considered to be aggressive, or that using a normal smiley face is passive aggressive. They didn't know, or that they didn't know that the words that they chose were inappropriate, or whatever it is. So suspecting that they didn't mean anything bad, even if they sound like it, goes a long way. And then checking, like, hey, I read your message this way. What did you intend? And then the other person can say that, oh, I didn't intend that, or I actually did intend that because I'm really pissed off. And then you have a conversation of why they're pissed off. So those two principle of charity, and then trying to have good intentions when you do right to people.
I'm just thinking, is this usually harder with developers?
Is it?
Is it? Is it?
But that's actually, I wanted to ask, I had like one question in my mind when I came to this talk. And that is that oftentimes I'm asked, how do I communicate with non-technical people so that they understand? It's a really hard thing to solve as a non-technical person myself. So how do you communicate with non-technical people?
That's a hard problem to solve. Usually I try to just simplify, like if there's some, let's say that there's like a solution I'm suggesting. I just try to simplify it as much as I can. And usually like people who aren't like this development oriented, I guess they don't really even care about the like technical details. So I just try to focus on the goal. What does this solution, for example, achieve? Well, still, I do use a lot of time to like write some messages. Yeah, it does take a lot of time usually.
Yeah, but it takes time to form it in a way that you consider the recipient. And if you just write from your point of view, it's quicker, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee a good end result. And then you end up spending more time later on.
For sure. Yes.
But how about Vlad? You have the business background. Is it easier for you?
I think, first of all, it's a bit easier, at least to form your thoughts and how you express the things. But what I want to start with is that I think that every person, or at least almost every person, is a technical person at the same time. Because everyone uses smartphones, everyone uses televisions, anything like that, and some basic things are clear. Like at least people know that we have like iOS and Android. I think everyone knows that. Yeah, it's like two fields of smartphones, so to say, and everyone knows what is smartphone. So for everyone uses that. And recently, like during summer, we had kind of talk like about the technologies, and there was a question why could be like iOS development a bit easier or harder at the same time when Android is different and could be also easier or harder than like iOS. And I was the only technical person there. Everyone else, they were like, well, non-technical people, but they know this. They have this background of using, one uses Android, one uses iOS. Just the example, like you have noticed that, for example, some application in here is a bit different from there. So what could be the reason for that? And I would put my thoughts so that, like based on that, for example, this is the example of this application, and in this application, and then trying to find those like non-technical words, but based on the experience that everyone might know, or I assume at least that these people know how to use the smartphone. But in general, I think that everyone is a technical person in this.
Yeah, of course. I mean, you have to take into account, like, of course, all people could be devs if they wanted to be, but.
So basically, I agree with the idea that technical and non-technical people have more in common than if we put them in two different camps, like there's technical people and then there's non-technical people, and they're very different. I think they have more in common, and technical people can understand non-technical and non-technical technical more than we give them credit for example. And at the same time, I think that we are in a bubble, that within this bubble, that's the case. But if we go outside of that bubble, it's a little bit different story. And I can use my godmother as an example. We were driving from my grandmother's place from Lappeenranta to Kerava, and it's a 3-hour drive. And she asked me, like, what is coding? Like, what is code? What does coding mean? And I'm a fast talker. I can produce a lot of words per minute. And I consider myself to be very clear and concrete when I explain things, because I teach things for a living. And yet, during that 3-hour drive, I was not able to explain it in a sense that she would have been like, now I get it, now I understand. Mm-hmm. And it was a weird experience for me to fail that badly, trying to explain code in a way that she would feel comfortable saying that, yes, now I understand. So I think that I trust my godmother a lot, and I think that if she really wanted to be a developer, yeah, she probably could, but it would be a huge push from where she is now. And I think that we need to remember that there are very different levels of understanding, even when it comes to smartphones and televisions and all that.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's like one of the main things in communicating, like even with in dev-to-dev communication, like as well as non-dev-to-dev communication, that there are levels of knowledge, like understanding, and you cannot assume that the other person knows the same stuff as you know.
Exactly.
And that's what you have to take into account when trying to communicate.
It's like me explaining to my mom like something. Like, Vlad, there is some pop-up message on my computer, and I cannot close it. What shall I do?
It's a hacker.
I'm like, okay, I know what this pop-up message is. So just do this, and it sounds simple for me. But my mom was like, it does not work. I'm like, are you sure you did that and this? Oh no, there was like one more step in the middle that should be obvious. Yeah, but she skipped it because she was actually trying to follow my instructions and not thinking like in general that there could be some basic step that she already knows that she could take. That's like one of the example of communication fail, which is also good to talk about. I should be in that situation either more specific or more general.
Yeah, I think like you can, like in communication, you can also just like mention that, okay, I'm trying to like make this very simple. Hope you don't mind. It's just the nature of this business.
And I think that's the beauty of communication, that we oftentimes forget that we can go back and try again. We can be transparent what we're doing. Like you said, we can have the meta talk, like this is what I'm doing now and this is the reason why. And then if you see that the other person is offended or doesn't understand, we can check, especially in this form of communication. Now, we were talking about the written form of communication before, and it's more difficult because you can't know the reaction of the other person because you can't see the look on their face. And like, now it looks like Tom is not getting what I tried to say. Like, do I have to maybe simplify this a bit? But I do have one extra tip to the non-technical, or how to communicate to non-technical people with what level of technical detail. Because of course, when you use jargon, it simplifies or it makes the communication faster. If we have the same terminology, I don't have to use detours. I can use the term and you understand what I mean. So when you go to a person and you don't know their level of technical expertise, you just ask them some type of a question. And then when you listen what they respond, you can spot the terms they use. So if they use the term themselves correctly, then it's probably safe to assume that you can use the same terminology with them.
Right.
But I say correctly because sometimes they will answer you and use all the terms, but they use it wrong, and it's obvious that they don't even know what they're talking about, and they just want to sound fancy. So then I would simplify even if they use difficult language.
I just wanted to raise one more topic. We actually talk a lot about communication, but we didn't talk about miscommunication. Just the basic example that I would mention is from my mostly previous jobs, not on the current one. I haven't experienced yet. So from my previous experience, if I let's say very simple, I do something because someone, like let's say manager, told me to do this, but there was also one more manager who checks that. And it's like already 3 people involved, and the other manager does not like it or something, and I am responsible for the thing that I did, not the first person who told me to do that. I consider this as a miscommunication between them because they didn't agree on the common solution, what kind of task to give to me. I took it very personally. It could be that I was miscommunicating with those managers. But at this moment now, when I'm like older, more experienced, I would say that I took it too serious. Really was not my problem, was not my fault. And about improvement of that is to have like kind of internal tool or internal regulations, depends on the company, which could make this communication simplified or at least unified.
How would that tool, if you had that tool back then, how would it have helped you with the miscommunication situation?
At my previous job, I think it should be like a set of rule, like what should you do in case of this situation? What kind of behavior should it be? Or so that the first manager does not have to tell you, so that you already know in advance that you have to do that. Or in this situation, you have to do this. Now, this is your responsibility because this is the set of rules, not because someone told you to do like that.
Sort of resource or like project management type of a communication tool.
Yeah. Well, the situation that I'm talking about, we had on that job, we had a lot of like applications, let's say, in the computers or in the devices that we use, but there was never this situation explained, for example, or the other situation explained. So there were some training videos, but could be good to have like more training videos or something like that, so that we know how to handle this situation next time.
So in that case, it sounds like your manager should have taken the responsibility there.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think this is very common that when we feel upset or something goes bad, it's easy to start to crave for guidelines or processes or procedures or tools, especially technical tools. Like I have heard a gazillion times that if only there was an app that we could use to, like, for example, give feedback or solve difficult conversations, that we wouldn't have to do it in person. But at the same time, I there's nothing wrong with knowledge sharing. There's nothing wrong with communication tools. There's nothing wrong with communication procedures. They're all very helpful. Yet oftentimes what we are lacking is the capability to discuss like what went wrong, to give feedback, that you could have given feedback to your manager and the manager of the person that they were talking to, like, hey, this is how I felt about it, this is how I experienced it, this is how it affected me. And then you could have discussed like how should it be done the next time.
I did not hesitate to give feedback to my managers ever. Like if this situation happens, I'm like, well, I firstly might take it a bit personal, but then I process my thoughts. Maybe next day I would like sit and, hey, the situation yesterday was not what I would expect from the manager.
Do you think it is helpful to have like this one lead person basically in a, like, for example, a project that kind of handles the communication then from like this dev collective to outside world?
It's a good question. Yes and no. I don't think it's necessary if the developers are the sorts of developers who actually enjoy communicating with the outside world
Yeah.
and or are skilled to do so. And then if they feel that they are uncomfortable doing it and or they really don't even want to learn how to do it, then it saves a lot of time and maybe energy if there is one lead person who deals that.
Yeah.
It depends. Like if you are in a project that you would really benefit from having the conversation directly with the client or with the end users, then it's probably that in your job description you are expected to know how to communicate and actually want to communicate. And then there are projects where it's completely fine to be, like you said in the beginning of the talk, that you can just be in the room and do the job and somebody else deals with the communication, and it's completely fine. As long as we are somewhat like aware, we do that conscious decision instead of end up having whatever we have.
I think at least like in end customer products, I think it's very helpful for the developers to like immerse themselves in the communication with the end customers. Or I don't necessarily say that they should do like help desk stuff, but or anything like that, but like just somehow see like how they use the app and what are the complaints or what are the like the good stuff. Then again, at least to me, I've seen that it's helpful to have this one person who handles that communication, so people can kind of, or like the other devs can like focus on solving the problems, and then the one person like does the communication, because that also takes a lot of time, and that time goes away from solving the problems and development. And
Exactly. And I think we should be mindful that it can change depending on a project. It can change depending on the team, like depending on the client. Like some clients are very high maintenance. They require a lot of communication. So at that point, it might make sense to have a person dedicated to do it. And then there are very low maintenance clients who are like, yeah, I have this problem, please fix it. And then they're happy with the end result. And then you might not need anybody there.
There has to be also like what we talk about, like non-technical and technical person communication. Like there are some clients who are just, okay, we want the product and we basically don't care how it's done. And when the developer starts to explain that this thing is not possible or something like that, then it's better that the developer or like the person who has like understanding of a bit of development and how to communicate can explain to the client, like for example, we cannot make this feature, or actually we suggest some other solution. Yeah, in this case, it's very good that there is one person who communicates that, but they have to, this like one person has to know like what the developer can do and what can't.
Because I often hear the complaint that sales promises things and then the delivers have to deliver whether it's possible or not. Previously, I used to say that everybody needs to get better at communicating, and I still, to some level, think that that's the case, especially because it's not just work-related communications. We need to communicate at home equally much or even more than we have to communicate at work. So knowing how to communicate with other people is very useful skill to have. And still, I think that if it's really like something that you're not at all interested in and you really don't want to spend your time and energy learning and you just want to be a technical person doing technical things, then surround yourself with people who actually enjoy it, appreciate that they can do it, and then hope that they appreciate the things that you can do. So that then there's like this beautiful symbiosis where both like benefit from the skills of the other.
Like if there are people who don't really want to do that communication with the outside world, but don't mind like communicating with other devs, then maybe there should be one dev who doesn't mind communicating with the outside world, but can.
I like the term outside world.
Yeah.
Outside world. Outside world.
You mean non-technical?
Yes.
And or just outside of the company or outside of your team even. So it's your inner world where you're comfortable with the people you're comfortable with, and then somebody else deals with the other world. yeah, I think it's a good idea to just notice that you have somebody you can talk to, and then they can help you with that.
Yeah.
I think it's oftentimes it's enough. Even if I do think that some basic communication skills are very helpful in life in general, because we can't completely avoid it.
Yeah, in this work you cannot avoid it. Yes, that is true. Yes.
Actually, I wanted to ask a question from you as an experienced person in this. Like, does the feedback motivate people? That's my question. You're like you were talking about that, like you could give the feedback and maybe you will not ever hear from this person anymore. So that's why you might not even think like what kind of feedback you give. But do you think that we have to think of feedback so that we motivate the people, or at least should the manager give the feedback so that the feedback motivates the employee?
I think that motivation, it's a good question. I think motivation is more of an inner drive that comes from autonomy, that I have control over my work, that I do things that I care about and I get better. That's like the core of motivation. But in order for me to know that I'm getting better, that's where feedback comes in. So if I get praise or if I get evaluation that shows that I'm getting better at this, then it feeds motivation. And then autonomy, on the other hand, requires that we know what we're supposed to do and whether we're doing the right things. And that's also something that feedback plays a role in. So if I don't know that I'm doing the correct things and these things are beneficial, then it's really hard to be autonomous. And then I think that even corrective feedback, or I just learned the term feedback that is aiming for a change, which kind of is better than negative feedback in my sense, in my mind. I think that we need that in order to get better. So I think the feedback it plays a crucial role in motivating, but maybe not in the way we have learned to think about it. But I do think that praise is very important. Like genuine praise, when you see that somebody does something good and saying that, hey, that was cool, that made my life easier, that was beautiful, that was helpful, I appreciate what you did. I think that has a very high effect on our motivation, because we feel that we are getting better, we're doing the correct things, that we're helping other people. So I think that if we do give praise, it's I want to say automatically, but I'm not sure whether that's true, automatically motivating. But I think we should just, in general, as managers and as colleagues and as family members, just learn to appreciate other people more than we do, especially in Finnish culture. We're not very comfortable at appreciating other people very lightly.
True. That's natural. Doesn't come natural to us.
No.
But I think with like feedback also, like if you give it like regularly, I think it also helps with like honing in to what you are good at, actually. I would think so, because like you get praised for certain things. You did this well, you're very good at this. And then you start to notice, okay, I'm getting very good feedback from this stuff I'm doing.
There's also a risk there. If you do get feedback for some things and some things only, that you start to sort of...
Yes, that's the double-edged word.
Yeah, and you should be mindful of the labels that you get. One person one time asked, like, if I get praised that I'm very... I take initiative, that I carry responsibility, do I tend to do that more and then end up being, for example, a manager if I don't want to? And I think that's a real risk. Like you end up, people give you things that they see you're good at, and then it narrows the things that you do, and you end up in a role that is narrowing and or not the thing you would like to do. So to be mindful of the labels that we carry. And still, I think that even if I do get praise, I can still think that, okay, this is what I'm good at, but that interests me. I want to do that too. And it's okay to notice that I might not get praised for this because I'm not good at this yet, but it like widens my perspective.
All of this requires a lot of self-awareness. And that might be hard, also very person-dependent. I would like to think that I am myself like super self-aware. Like
and I think that like if we can stereotype, I think developers have a bit more... They are a little bit more likely, I think that's a better way to say it, to have introspection, because the line of job you do is to analyze what you are doing and how you're doing. Sometimes it doesn't translate into analyzing the way you communicate and behave, but oftentimes it does. And it's easier. I think it's easier transition from analyzing the way you code and do software to analyzing how you behave and communicate than if you wouldn't have that introspection about your own work to begin with.
Well, that is interesting. I haven't thought like how much has like my work affected that part of my personality, but yeah, definitely when you do work, you have to like think about your assumptions about the problems and stuff like that. Like, why do I assume that this should work and stuff like that? So I guess that requires some introspection.
I would say so. That's my experience. But then again, it's a bubble, so it might be that it's not the case with everybody. But yeah, that's my personal experience with working with developers, that there is a little bit more introspection there than perhaps in other domains that I've visited. And I don't think we ever become ready or perfect at communicating or being a person with other people. So instead of criticizing ourselves for it, let's try to like analyze, but with a kind, understanding, loving, merciful attitude.
Just thinking like, how could you foster an environment that feedback is encouraged and you don't have to be afraid to give it, basically?
I think that's a beautiful question. Well, first of all, I would start with praise. So I would start with giving positive feedback. It's easier than to start from the critical things. So, and to show an example. So anybody can begin. Anybody can be the first one who starts that, and then other people catch up with it. Maybe sort of discuss about it, that's what you're trying to achieve, that you're trying to achieve a culture where we could give feedback very openly and we could like make it a habit, of an everyday habit. Then there could be some structures or processes. So you could have a specific channel for giving praise in your Slack or your Teams, or you could have a habit of doing that in your monthly or weekly meetings, or you could establish some other way of giving praise as a routine. And then when the time comes to give some corrective feedback or feedback that is aiming for a change, first of all, to make sure that everybody who wants to do it have enough knowledge of how to do it constructively. There are a gazillion books and YouTube videos you can watch of how to give feedback and how not to give feedback. And then maybe if it feels daunting in the beginning, to do it with the third person. So to ask, for example, the HR to come with you in the situation to help you like deliver it. In the beginning, if you feel that you are not fully comfortable of, or you're not fully comfortable of giving it, and or you're not sure how it's going to go. I think we don't use that possibility enough to have other people help us with these conversations in the beginning. And I would prefer that over to try to get somebody else to give it. Like oftentimes we say to our manager or a Scrum Master or a product owner that, hey, can you please give this feedback to that person? And that's not the kind way or the good culture way to do it. And then last but not least, when you are the one who received the critical feedback, to say thank you for it, to appreciate it. So yes, it hurts in the beginning, of oftentimes, especially if we haven't gotten used to getting it. But then when you have analyzed and handled it, to go back and say that was brave of you, and it makes my job better when I get this feedback, and I really appreciate it. Thank you. That way they will give it again. So I think those are the starting points. Then it's just repetition.
Yeah, I would like to add, if possible, to giving positive feedback, or like starting giving positive feedback. Also coming back to my experience, like the differences between business and non-business, or like maybe it's actually the difference between like more hectic environment at work and more like relaxed environment at work. The people tend to not to give feedback because they don't have time for that. On the other hand, whenever the feedback is given, the person to whom this feedback is given takes it could take it very personally and could be stressful about that because they're also tired.
That is actually a very good point, because I think that it requires that you have bandwidth to analyze the feedback, to actually do some changes if needed, and to sort of internalize it. So if you're really stressed maybe from home you have a screaming 2-year-old and you haven't slept for 4 months, or at work you have a project that is taking all of your bandwidth. It's not a very fruitful time to get feedback. And then only when you feel like you have the bandwidth to process it, then it makes sense. And I think one thing that we don't maybe sometimes do is to ask the other person that, hey, is it okay? I have some feedback to give. Like, do you have the bandwidth for it at the moment? Okay, sometimes we can't wait. If it's something that's very urgent and needs correcting immediately, it's harming the company, it's harming the project or something. But we can at least be mindful about it, like to consider that when would be the best time for the other person to actually receive it.
But I mean, the relaxing environment thing, that also affects like just other communication as well. Like it is much easier to communicate when you don't have to, or when the environment is relaxed, basically.
You can think of what like a bit more as well.
Well, yeah,
exactly.
I guess, yeah. So you have more room to think things through and what you're gonna say.
And think about the other person's perspective.
Yes, as well.
Yeah. Well, how might they receive this, or what might their interests be, and why am I communicating this to you specifically, and all that. I just had a discussion with this lovely lady who has studied a lot about feedback and how to give feedback, and many of the thoughts that I shared with today are actually hers. But she said that, and I've noticed it's also in there's this book called Thanks for the Feedback. And in the book and in her speech as well, she said that there are like three types of feedback. And we talk about feedback as a general thing. Like, I want feedback, or I got feedback, or I'm giving you feedback. But what is it actually that we're giving? And the three different feedback formats are appreciation. So what did you do well? And I'm appreciating you. And I think it's easier to, instead of thinking that I need to give you feedback, it's easier to think that what did you do that I appreciate? How could I appreciate you today? Then there's coaching, which is like, I want to make you better. Like you said, if the aim is to actually make you better at your work, it's very different than I'm going to tell you what you did wrong. And coaching is aiming of improvement. And then there's evaluation, which is simply like, how am I doing on a scale or in comparison or... And I think sometimes we need evaluation. I want to know how my skills are. Have I improved or not? Sometimes we would like to have coaching. I would want to get better and I would like to know how. And then sometimes I just need appreciation. So we could be a bit more mindful. Like, we could use these different words so that we wouldn't talk about only feedback. But at the same time, we could be more mindful of what it is that I'm asking for, and or what it is that I'm giving, or what it is that I'm doing actually here now when I think about feedback.
Yeah, I would say that I'm kind of not a unique personality, because there's many people who changed from one field to another, and having this kind of different experience brings me into fact that fortunately, maybe in the more relaxed environment, it's easier to communicate. It's softer to take feedback. Maybe it's not that much personal, and also to give feedback. As well as have such kind of sessions, we are also communicating. And thanks for the discussion. I learned a lot about feedback, about your godmother as well.
But I think what I'm going to pick up from this discussion, which was very interesting and very lovely, is I actually liked a lot that you said that we are all technical people. And I think it's very easy and very lazy to put people in boxes so easily, to think that they're technical and non-technical, or devs and non-devs. And like you said, we're all sorts of combinations and more technical than we expect and more business-like than we expect. And if we stay in those boxes, it's easy to miscommunicate because you expect things from the other person instead of meeting them as a unique human being and not considering them to be non-dev or non-technical or something else, or business people or whatever it is. So I think that was a good reminder for me, because I'm also guilty of doing that, of putting people in boxes and giving them labels. And it's faster than every time to start from the scratch, but I think it's a bit lazy thing to do. So,
but also it's your job to bridge the gap.
Well, that's true. But I think it was a very interesting point for me to consider that we can all be technical.
Yeah. Well, I have some points maybe that I want to emphasize about the communication. Don't assume that the other person knows the same stuff as you do. Don't be too harsh. Just try not to be rude, and take into account like the other person's thoughts and feelings. Just show that you care, basically. I guess that's the main thing. Like, if you just show that you care and you actually care, then I think everything will resolve itself.
Well said. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.